Welcome to the video on additional story problems for this. So this is for people who wanted extra practice to test their skills on the story problems. So I'm just going to go over how I would solve these and you can see if you're on the right track. The length of a rectangle. So since it's describing a rectangle, I would draw one. The length and the width. The length exceeds its width by 4 inches. So the length is bigger than the width by 4. So I'm going to say length is width plus 4. Find the dimension of the rectangle if its area is 96 square inches. So the area of a rectangle, remember, equals length times width. And I'm going to use the expression for length, w plus 4. So I'm going to take w times, and then in parentheses, w plus 4. Okay, w times w is w squared, w times 4 is 4w. Let's subtract 96 from both sides so that we have it in standard form. We may be able to factor this. So let's see, I'm going to try 96 divided by 8 and 12. 96 is 8 and 12. So negative 96 up here, 4 down there, 8, 12, 8 would be negative. So we have w minus 8, w plus 12. The solutions are 8 and negative 12. The width can't be negative 12, so it must be w. If the width is w and the length is w plus 4, then the length must be 12. These are both in inches. So we've got that right there, and we can test it. It does 8 times 12 equals 96, and the answer is yes, we've got it. Okay, let's try another one. If the measure of one side of a square, okay, so let's start by drawing a square. The thing that we know about squares is all the sides are the same length, so I'm going to call those both x. If the measure of one side of a square is increased by 2 centimeters, so if I take one side and increase it by 2, and the measure of the adjacent side is decreased by 2 centimeters. So adjacent means the side touching it, so this one's perfect, x minus 2. The area of the resulting rectangle, so it's not a square anymore because one side was made bigger by 2, the other side smaller by 2. So I'm like, wow. Let's see, bigger by 2, maybe like that, smaller by 2, maybe it could look like that. Okay, so now we have a rectangle, and the area is 32 square centimeters. So to find x, I'm going to multiply the length and width of the new rectangle and set it equal to 32. X times x is x to the second. X times negative 2 is negative 2x. 2 times x is positive 2x, and 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 2x plus 2x, that's 0. Let's go ahead and add the 4 to both sides, and then we have squared. Quantity squared equals number, so we can just take the square root of both. We would get two solutions, positive and negative 6. Negative 6 doesn't make sense in a story where the side has a length of x. And then they want the measure of one side of the square, the original square. So remember how the original square had lengths x and x, so one side of that would be 6 centimeters. The senior class at Bay High School buys jerseys to wear to the football game. The cost of the jerseys can be modeled by this equation, where C is the amount it costs to buy X jerseys. How many jerseys can they purchase for $430? Okay, so the cost that they can spend on this is $430. So I'm going to replace C with $430. And X is the number of jerseys. Let's go ahead and put this in standard form. So we'll have 0 equals 0.1x squared plus 2.4x minus 405. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do quadratic formula here. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay. I'm calculating the discriminant now. I got 167.76. I'm going to double check that. Let's see. Yeah, I got the same thing again, and on our denominator, 0.2. Okay, from here we can look at our two things. We're just gonna put it into my calculator first with the plus. So I'm gonna go negative 2.4 plus the square root of 167.76 divided by 0.2, and I got 52. Oops, didn't want yellow. I got 52.76, so I'm going to round it to 52.8. If I do now the subtraction one, I'm guessing it's going to give me a negative answer that will not be useful, but it's worth checking just in the name of being clear. This one I got negative 76.76, so yeah, they wouldn't buy negative 76 jerseys. How many can they purchase for $430? So if they purchase 52, they'll have some money left over. If they purchase 53, then they will have spent a little bit more than what they could afford. So I would probably stop it at 52 jerseys. We can always double check that by plugging in 52 to our equation and see if we get a number close to 0. So 0.1 times 52 squared plus 2.4 times 52 minus 405, negative 9.8. I'm going to go back in and try 51. And negative even more. Let me go back in and try 53. That'd be 3.1. So yeah, I think 52 jerseys is still our best bet. They're going to have a little bit of money left over, but that's okay. All right, hope these are helping. 16, Colin is building a deck on the back of his house. He has enough lumber for the deck to be 144 square feet. This is area. The length should be 10 feet more than its width. So length should be 10 feet more than the width. What should the dimensions of the deck be? Okay, so the width would be W, length is 10 plus W, and the area is 144. So W times 10 is 10W, W times W is W squared. Okay, if I put this in standard form, it will look like that. Looking for two numbers that I can multiply that give negative 144. But when I add those numbers, I get positive 10. I know 144 divides by 12 and 12. Let's try 8. 8 and 18. That would be perfect. If the 8 were negative and the 18 positive, we could add those up to get 10. Okay, so the factors are going to be W minus 8 and W plus 18 equals 0. And then the two solutions will be W equals 8 and negative 18. Negative 18 doesn't make sense. What should the dimensions of the deck be? Well, the width should be 8 feet. And the length should be 10 more than the width, so 18 feet. All right. The product of two consecutive negative odd integers. Odd, negative. So we got a couple of things going on here. Two consecutive negative odd integers. Okay, so when we're talking about this, we want to remember these expressions. X is going to represent our first integer, and to get the next integer as being odd, if x is odd, I need to add 2 to it instead of 1, right? If you think of like, maybe we've got -5 and I add 2 to it, I get -3. So those are both odd and negative. Their product is 483. Okay, so I'm going to multiply them together. That's what product means. X times x plus 2 is 483. That would be x squared plus 2x, and if we're putting it in standard form, we would then subtract 483. And let's see, 483 divides by, I know it divides by 3. 3 and 161. Well, that didn't help. The square root of 483 is 21, so let's try 43 divided by 23. Wow, it worked. 23 and 21. Whoops. Multiply together to give 483. We need the smaller one to be negative so that when I add them I get a positive answer too. Okay, so their factors will be x plus 23 and x minus 21. So the solutions are -23 and +21. Now one of these answers might not fit. Notice that they want two negative odd integers. So these both happen to be odd, but only one of them is negative. Do you see how the answer we want on this one is -23, which is unusual. We've often said that we didn't want the negative answer, so that's unique. If x is -23, then x plus 2 must be -21. So those are our consecutive odd integers. Nice. All right, last one. The Demon Drop at Cedar Point in Ohio. I think this is a roller coaster. Takes riders to the top of a tower and drops them 60 feet. A function that approximates this ride is that, where h is the height in feet and t is the time in seconds. About how many seconds does it take for riders to drop 60 feet? Okay, they told us that they go to the top of a tower and then drop 60 feet. Okay. Since this equation is showing us that they start at 60 feet high, so we could just solve to find out when does t equal 0. So I'm just going to use this equation, -16t squared plus 64t plus 60 equals 0. I can see that these are all divisible by 2, and I think probably divisible by 4 as well. So I could divide everything by 4, but I'm going to use quadratic formula anyway, so maybe I'll just go straight to it. T equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, the discriminant is 64 squared minus 4 times -16 times 60. I got 7936. So -64 plus or minus 7936 all over -32. Okay, since this is a story problem and I'm shooting for a decimal approximation, I'm going to go straight to my calculator. First, I'm going to calculate -64 plus square root of 7936 divided by -32. When I did that, I got the answer -0.78, we'll say 4. A negative answer doesn't fit what we're looking for, so let's try the other one as well, which is -64 minus the square root of 7,936. Enter, divided by -32. This one yields 4.784. So about how many seconds does it take to drop the 60 feet, and they want us to round to the nearest tenth. That's this number. So do we keep the 7 or do we go up to an 8? It's dependent on the number just to the right. If this one is 5 or greater, then we need to round up. If it's 4 or less, then we stay where we're at. So this one we're going to round up to 4.8 seconds.